Get ready to uncover truths and reality of today's politics. Here's your host, Lori Mills.
Welcome to another edition of Uncover California. I'm Lori Mills, your host. Such a crazy news week. I don't know if any of you guys caught the Senate hearing this morning with Rove. There's more questions now that I have. Why didn't the local police have communication with the Secret Service? It's crazy to me. And have you guys noticed Google and Facebook are censoring again, and they're not putting up President Trump's assassination attempt? You know, I've got a friend here today that she's been censored. She's been attacked by the media. Why? Because President Trump liked her and retweeted her several times before COVID hit. And after COVID hit, all games were off. I want her to be able to tell you her story, and I want to proudly welcome Dr. Dawn Michael to Uncover California. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Lori. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm super happy. You and I got to be friends over the last couple of years. You work with PERC, and for those that don't know, PERC is a great organization working to save our kids against medical tyranny, and have even grown to firefighters and first responders, and you're basically working with them now. But you used to be a sex therapist.
Yes. So, first of all, I put all my passion, because I had a tragedy, into PERC. So I'll just go back to that. Yes, I was a marriage, family, child therapist, and then I have my PhD in human sexuality. And I owned a company at one point with my late husband, who is a family practice doctor. And right now I'm not doing sex therapy anymore because, unfortunately, I had to shut down the practice because he passed away.
Wow.
So now I'm working with PERC.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
I want you to be able to tell your story, because, again, we're seeing COVID go around again. We're seeing censorship happening again. And it's something I don't think that we should forget. And you told me something quite disturbing, and we will get to that, because remdesivir is still being used in hospitals today.
Correct.
So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how this journey started for you?
I would say that I kind of came out of the closet in a way that I was a conservative. And in my profession, that was something that you just don't do. You have to be liberal, and being a woman and being Jewish. And in my profession, there was just no way they were going to accept me being conservative. So once I started coming out with support for President Trump, they basically destroyed me and destroyed my business. And once President Trump started retweeting me, they came after me for an entire year with death threats, destroying my books, destroying my Yelp page, my Google page, anything that had to do with my business. They wanted to destroy me, to shut me up. And I didn't shut up. I continued to talk, and President Trump continued to retweet me about 11 times. So in that process, I did not want them to go after my husband's practice. So I shut down the practice that we had together, and he was a family practice doctor in the area for 30 years.
Wow.
And he was also the medical director at Cal Lutheran University for about 20 years, and had worked at Los Robles Hospital for maybe 10 to 20 years, and that's where he passed away. So he knew everybody at the hospital. So the journey started when I started, they came after me with President Trump, and then COVID hit.
Now, these other doctors that came after you, these are the same doctors that are now wanting to give kids sex changes.
That's why I left my association, by the way. So I was with ASECT, and one of the, many of the conferences, I went to one before I ended up leaving them. They started bashing President Trump there, and we had to wear pins that said what your gender was at that point. And I thought, they've just lost their minds. So, and this was quite a while ago, actually. So I was already deciding that I just couldn't be a part of that association anymore. And
What association is that?
ASECT.
Okay.
Yeah, out of Washington, D.C. And they're basically everybody who is in my profession. Either you're sex educators, the ones that are writing all the material for the schools, or you're a sex therapist, or people who were presidents of Planned Parenthood. So that's why they came after me so hard, because they went to the same school, we're in the same profession. So I understand their thinking when they're doing this stuff. And so I've been able to help Perk with some of the bills coming out and writing some of the information for parents because I was a part of the group.
Wow.
And it's been an interesting journey for me.
I applaud your
least.
boldness, though, because we need people like you, especially now that 1955 was signed into law.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're just coming for the kids. And I've said multiple times, I don't care how somebody chooses to live their life once they're adult.
Right.
But for these kids, they're way too young to be making life-altering decisions. So I applaud you in being bold and being proud and standing for what you believe in and defending the kids up until this day. So when COVID hit, something happened to you that is just tragic. And you, once again, as a doctor, were censored as well, correct?
Oh, terribly. Yes.
And your husband as well?
Well, what happened with my husband is he has no social media whatsoever.
Okay.
And at the time, what a lot of people don't know, or maybe they do if they've listened to me, he was giving out ivermectin, and he was able to do medical exemptions for college students. He did his own research and found out that there was something that in the vaccine, or quote unquote vaccine, people were allergic to. And he was bucking the system, and he was saving lives by doing that. He came up with his own protocol, and people were coming to his office, his patients he had had for years, and he was giving them that particular cocktail, and they weren't going to the hospital. The hospital wasn't making money off of his patients, and the few that went there, 9 of them, he became their patient advocate, and this is where the hospitalist, who happened to have been his friend, probably didn't like the fact that he was watching out for his patients and telling him how to treat them with ivermectin and his own protocol.
How much money do the hospitals and doctors make by pushing the drugs recommended by Fauci and crew?
I believe, I don't know, but I believe that remdesivir was anywhere between maybe $15,000 to $30,000 per patient. Then they got money for putting them on the vent, and then they got money for them dying of COVID. I think maybe close to $100,000 per patient. So I'm not exactly sure. It might vary in different states and different hospitals, but there definitely was an incentive to kill.
And then they turned around and billed the patient as well.
Of course. So all the people that I came into contact with, or many of the people I came into contact with on Twitter, because I was setting up an entire email system and I wanted to go after them, and I would hear their stories and I would post them on Twitter. And many of them were single parents that also had huge doctor bills that they had to pay for, so they no longer had a spouse helping them with young children. And the situation is just, it's horrendous. And it's still going on, by the way.
But this went further with you.
Yes.
So you contract COVID and your husband contracts COVID. What happened?
So we both had thought, well, I think we did have COVID prior to it actually being known that it was COVID. And then he was treating patients in his office for 2 years and never caught COVID, right? So when the Delta variant came out, I believe it was a new bioweapon, completely separate. The strange thing is we were the only 2 people in the office that got the Delta. And I think that's weird. I don't know how we contracted it. Maybe there was one patient of his, but in any event, we didn't think we had COVID, so we didn't treat it as COVID. He didn't take the ivermectin. He didn't do anything. We just thought it was a bad flu. And if we had treated ourselves the way the protocol, he was doing the protocol, it probably would have saved his life, and I wouldn't have ended up in the hospital as well.
So I got the Delta variant. Oh. And the interesting thing about the Delta variant, which I will never forget because I was sick, I felt like my skin was not breathing. And I know that that sounds weird, but it was almost like I could feel my layer of skin, but I couldn't sweat it was like every pore had just locked up, and whatever was in me was trapped. It didn't feel like anything I had ever had before. And when I went to the doctors, and I went to 3, 1 in person, 2 by telemed, and each 3 said, go home until you can't breathe. And in the meantime, I'm like, I'm listening to Dr. Malone. I'm listening to Dr. Judy before they were censored.
Right.
Talk about ivermectin, talk about hydroxychloroquine. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I call my friend in Orange County and I'm like, I feel so sick. I've got Delta, or I didn't even know what it was. I had COVID. She drove up from Huntington Beach and brought me hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and a Z-Pack from Huntington Beach, dropped it on my doorstep. And I would say, I mean, I was sick for a couple weeks, but within, I would say, 48 hours of using it, I noticed my skin was breathing again. It was weird. It was like almost like the virus was encapsulated inside my body.
Wow.
Which I just don't even know. I've never had anything like that. And it's the only way I can describe it. So you get COVID. Who got COVID first? You or your husband, and you're not treating it like you normally would.
He got it first, and he had that really high fever for 3 days. This is why it was such a weird bioweapon. He got the high fever for 3 days, and then it went away for like a day or so. We thought it went away. I thought it was like hibernating in his lower lungs, because that's what it attacked on us, was our lower lungs. And then all of a sudden it came back really, really bad. And we even had an oxygen tank at home. And I finally said to him, you need to start taking ivermectin. I don't care whether it's COVID or not. Let's just treat it as such. But it was too late. I think it was already maybe day 7, day 9. I don't really remember.
And early treatment was key.
It was key. I mean, I took it on day 4, so I wasn't as bad as him. It got to the point where he literally couldn't breathe. We had the pulse, I forget what it's called, where you put on
the pulse ox.
The pulse ox, and his was below 80. Like, he wasn't getting any oxygen. And I remember dropping him off at the hospital, and they wouldn't let me come in with him. And I said, please do not let them give you remdesivir. Please, please, please don't. He said, I won't. And then I couldn't get a hold of him because his phone went out. And when his phone came back on, he texted me. I have all the text messages that it was like a war zone in the hospital. And I had experienced the same thing. So he was
What do you mean war zone?
So what happened, what was going on in the hospitals at that time, because the Delta variant was there, and then they had the other COVID situation come out. So you would go into the emergency room. It would take forever to get a bed if you were sick. So it could be you're sitting there for 8 to 10 hours. I was sitting in a wheelchair. They didn't give me any water. They never tested me for COVID. They didn't do anything. And they had me in a room with other people that were not even there for COVID. So quote unquote, how, viral was it if I was sitting in a small room, like a closet with 2 other people that were not there for COVID? And also the doctors only had a mask on, which we all know don't work. But anyway, when you went upstairs to the actual COVID ward, they wore a complete hazmat suit. So the hypocrisy was just so loud. It was insane at just the whole game or the whole show in that particular room. So that's what happened to him. They kept him in the emergency area for a while.
So when he started texting you, what was he texting you?
He was texting me how sick he was. He was texting me that he finally got a room. He was in the ICU. They put him on high oxygen, and that they were giving him medication. And I said, what are they giving you? They're not giving you remdesivir. And he said, no. And I tried to get a hold of the nurses for 2 days, finally got a hold of one. I said, what are you giving my husband? She didn't say remdesivir.
Now explain to people why remdesivir is bad.
So remdesivir was used when the Ebola outbreak happened, which Fauci was involved with. And it was killing 30 to 40% of the people and injuring their kidneys, their internal organs. It basically makes your kidney shut down, and it usually happens about 9 days in. And this is what we saw too with COVID. So it doesn't help. There's no information really out there that shows that it's helping. I went back and I looked at some of the studies, and if you really, really look at the studies, the people who didn't take it and the people who did take it, after I think they did it for 24 hours or 3 days, they had the same results, but the people who did take it, some of them had kidney failure. So I don't know how Fauci really got it approved, but he got it approved, remdesivir, to be in the hospitals and as the COVID protocol. So everybody who came in with COVID that was put in the COVID ward, they all got the remdesivir, and 30 to 40% died. So by the time my husband got there and I got there,
They had to keep that death ticker going on CNN.
right. But
Got to get president out of office.
But think about it, Lori. They already knew that it was killing people.
Right.
The hospital knew, the doctors knew, the nurses knew it was killing people.
Well, the fact that they put you in the emergency room with non-COVID patients, just like in New York, they threw COVID
elderly.
patients into nursing homes.
Yep.
And I hate to say it because it sounds so bad. It's as if they wanted the death count because, again, I think it was a bioweapon from
Yep.
China. We know for a fact that our government funds the Wuhan lab.
Yes.
And I think it was released in order to shut us down because the economy was booming under Trump and they needed to get rid of him.
Yep.
And I don't think that they cared how many people died in order to do so.
I don't think they care now.
Yeah, I don't either.
Obviously.
Well, they just tried to kill him.
Right. So there is no length that they won't take. So if people say, oh, why would the government do that? They really need to wake up and understand that not only was remdesivir there to bring up the death count, but when they allowed the COVID jab, I'll call it, and
The blood clotting
yes,
shot.
yes. And by the way, when my husband was texting me in the beginning, he told me that people were dying in the hospital of blood clots. Like almost every single person that was in there died. So I was one of the few to get out of the hospital. Once you went in there, the chances of you getting out were pretty slim.
That's scary.
It's really scary.
Okay, so your husband's texting you. He's telling you that they're giving him medication. They're not telling you what they're giving him. He's a doctor. You would think that they would tell him.
Right.
And so then what happened?
He finally found out they were giving him remdesivir, and I remember just like curling up in a ball and crying, and I knew like that's it. Like I just can't imagine he's going to survive it because he wasn't in great shape. You know, I think he was pre-diabetic. Well, I know now that they knew he was pre-diabetic and had kidney issues, which makes it murder, basically, because it's even written once you give somebody the remdesivir that has kidney issues, they're not going to survive it.
Right.
But in any event, I ended up in the hospital too. So we ended up on the same floor.
Yeah, I
And-
saw video of you very ill, and you were putting out video warning people.
Yep, in
So
the hospital.
So talk about this.
I was warning people while I was in the hospital what was going on, and I was saying they wouldn't let me see my husband. And at one point when I tried to leave the room, they drugged me. So I was drugged and in my room. When I finally came to, there was one really nice nurse. She says, oh my gosh, I told them don't, put codeine in the cough syrup we're giving you. They knew. It's like
Are you
written.
allergic to codeine?
Well, it makes you pass out.
See, I'm allergic to codeine.
I mean, it could have been. They didn't care. The lady
Yeah.
gave me cough syrup with codeine, the nurse. I mean, it was there. The other nurse said, like, oh, I can't believe she did that. So they didn't want me to see my husband. They didn't want me to see what was going on. And I basically recorded everything that happened in the hospital, all the inconsistency, what was happening, what the nurses were telling me. I had to lie that I was vaccinated because I was afraid when I went to sleep, they'd put the vaccine in. And the doctor was so creepy. He would come back to me because they were giving me this thing so my blood didn't clot. So they were administering this thing so my blood didn't clot. So they knew that people were dying of blood clots. And he came back and he said, oh, your blood is so, I forget, like flowing or red or whatever, looking
That's a
at
good
me.
thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, you mean everyone else that's in there that's vaccinated, their blood doesn't look the same? So I think he knew that I probably wasn't. So long story short, and there's a lot to this, day 5 that I was in there at night, they the day before, my husband texted me or called me and said that the kidney specialist had been in there and that he indeed was having kidney failure. And he said the night before, this is it on a text. And
there's no part of COVID that shuts down your kidneys.
No. It's
so
remdesivir.
It's an obvious cause and effect.
Yeah, 9 days in. Like
How
at
can
day 9.
healthcare? It kills me to think that healthcare professionals will knowingly let people die.
Yes, and it's even, I'm not that it's even worse with me, but the bad situation was these were colleagues that knew him for 20 years. And he's a doctor.
What did they say to you?
What do you mean? What did they, to them,
Oops,
it was
sorry.
just, what are they going to say? I mean, I did talk to the doctor, and when I found out they gave me remdesivir, 2 doses of remdesivir without my consent, I said to the doctor, why are you giving this to me in your protocol? It says that if I had COVID 5 days prior, that the remdesivir won't work. And he said, oh, yeah, you're right. We'll stop giving you remdesivir. And I said, wait, you gave my husband 5 doses of remdesivir, and he had it 9 days prior to coming in the hospital, and he didn't say anything. And written in my medical records, it shows that he agreed with me and took me off the remdesivir. So there's admission right there that they know, and that I didn't consent to it. So anyway,
So you're in the hospital.
I'm in the hospital.
You're documenting everything by video. You're putting out videos.
Yes.
You're telling them not to give you remdesivir.
Yes.
And and what kills me about this whole situation is how many people died alone.
Alone. We all died. I mean, my husband died alone.
So tell me about that. So you're still in the hospital?
I'm in the hospital with him. Literally, like he's across the hall, somewhere on the same floor. They will not let me see him. And we both were at home with COVID.
And you both have COVID.
And he knows everyone there. And she went to the hospital administrator, a nurse, a really nice nurse. She came back crying in tears. She's like, I don't know why they won't let you see your husband. I don't know. Anyway, the night before, he texted me, this is it. Do you understand? Like he knew. He just knew. And I was crying. I was beside myself. I couldn't go see him. I finally fell asleep. I woke up maybe 3 or 4 hours later, just like in a complete panic. A nurse comes running in, or the doctor, I don't remember at this time, and they said, your husband went to cardiac arrest and he's on a vent.
That's it.
And I said, what? Like it still was so shocking to me. And I said, you better get me a wheelchair and get me to see him immediately, or I am going to create so much, trouble in here. So in the time that it took them to get the wheelchair and me up and all that, he had passed.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I never got to say goodbye. So
that is so heartbreaking.
Very cruel.
Yeah. I will never understand why stuff like that happened. I will never forgive it. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure it doesn't ever happen again. What was scary about that whole situation to me too was how everybody complied. Mm-hmm. And I'll admit, when it first hit, the unknown, I think, was more scary than the virus. And we shut down everything. We could never do that again.
No.
So you go through all of this, which, God says, and there's nothing good about what happened, but he promises to use this for the good.
Right.
And now you're on a mission.
So when I was in the hospital, I even said to myself, I said, God wants me here for a reason. I always knew that because, I always have God with me and I pray. And so I knew that I was supposed to be there for a particular reason. I still don't think that reason has happened yet because I have so much information.
And people need to understand, this was 4 years ago, but this crap is starting again.
It's still happening. Like I said, they're still giving remdesivir in the hospital. So when I got out of the hospital, I continued to tweet about it. And I was getting probably 1 million views on some of my tweets about remdesivir. I made a video on YouTube. It started to go viral. They shut it down.
Of course they did.
Then they banned me from YouTube. 2 days later, the FDA approves remdesivir for infants and children. So I don't see that as a coincidence at all. So,
The fact they gave this vaccine to kids.
Oh. I mean, that's part of the
Everybody
reason.
I know that has had the vaccine, except for my son, so far so good, but my brother-in-law, seriously, ended up having all these internal problems, diverticulitis, to where they had to remove part of his, intestine. I'm not seeing anything good come from that vax.
Right. If we can't even call it a vax.
It's a clot shot.
It's a bioweapon itself. It affects the immune system. And I remember, speaking with my husband about it and why he wasn't recommending it to his patients. And he said to me point blank, they never had a honeymoon period for this. I've never seen anything like this in the 30 years of being a doctor, that they come out with this. And what stopped him in his tracks, he says, they're recommending it for pregnant women. He goes, that is beyond, I can't believe that they would ever do that. So,
and the miscarriages rose, didn't they?
Yeah, everything. And we don't know the long-term effects.
Right.
And so when I saw Amy on from PERC, and she was speaking about education and children and the mandates and fighting against that over 2 years ago, I felt like, wow, this is calling to me. This person's calling to me. I can't do anything about the remdesivir right now. I'm kind of letting that simmer until later
God's
on.
appointed time.
Yes. And to put my energy and my passion into something that is working, because PERC is winning.
Right.
They're winning.
So tell
these
the people that
battles.
don't know. Amy's been here before, but maybe somebody
Right.
didn't see that show. Tell everybody what PERC is and what you do.
So when I met Amy a couple years ago, I had my Twitter account and I saw her speaking about education, so on and so forth. And I put out a bunch of tweets on it and they got a good response. So Amy said to me, why don't you do that for PERC? Why don't you do our social media on Twitter? And that's how it blossomed. So I slowly got into it. And then I remember praying one night, which this is the funniest thing. And I told Amy this. I said, I've already been with PERC for a year and a half, and I'm just doing the Twitter stuff. Do I do more? Do I stay? Do I continue? Or do I go on a different path? I'm not really sure where to go. Maybe a few days later, Amy calls me up. She says, Dawn, would you like to be a board member?
Oh, wow. Well, and you've got the education to
Yes.
do this. And it's amazing to me that this one path you were on is now a completely different path. What warning would you give to people about not allowing this to happen to their family?
Oh, I would say we have to speak up.
Okay.
We cannot stay silent. We have to speak up. That's why I do it. I do it for people who maybe are not ready yet or still grieving or so on and so forth. I said, let me tell your story, or let me point you in a direction to tell your story. And I will say that Mickey Wallace has been doing a movie on this called Bad Medicine. It's all about remdesivir and what's going on. And he said this movie is the only movie he's had problem getting the funding for out of all the movies he's done. And I think I know why. And because they're still using it in the hospitals.
Right.
They don't want it to get out. And I was the very last person he interviewed for the movie.
Wow. And so this movie isn't out yet.
It's not out yet. They're still looking for funding, so anyone that can help promote it.
Where can they do that?
It's on the Plandemic. It's on his Twitter. I believe it's on his Instagram, and he has it up there right now. He put a preview of the movie. It looks amazing.
Okay, so who is he? Name, how do you spell it, and where do you find him?
Well, I know it's Mikki, and it's under Plandemic series on Twitter. It's just
Okay.
put in Plandemic.
Okay.
And you'll find it. It'll pop up.
And I absolutely love Plandemic the musical.
Oh,
Great
yes.
film.
Well, so now part of PERC is I'm doing a PERC social, which is just trying to bring the community together, which you went to, the last one. And we did show Plandemic the musical. It was fantastic. We had a
Yes.
huge turnout.
Yes.
Actually, we sold out, which was nice.
So I want to tell everybody, go to perkgroup.com and sign up. These guys have easy access. If a bad bill comes up, it's a click away. You can send an email to all your representatives. Super important you find them. Our 30 minutes went super fast. I'll have to have you back on again. Tell everybody where to find you.
So you can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm at, under Dawn's Mission. Or you can also look me up and you'll find me on Google. And let's see, I have a YouTube channel that you'll be able to find through that as well. It's under Dr. Dawn Michael, the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I haven't even tried to build my YouTube channel because they wiped me out once. And so now I'm strictly on Rumble.
Yeah.
But,
I'm on Rumble as well.
Yeah, Rumble's a good one because they're not going to censor you. And we see the censor machine is in high gear again, unfortunately. So, guys, follow Dawn Michael on X, on Instagram, join the PERT group, follow them at pertgroup.com, and then go look up in X Plandemic, where you can find information on this film. If anybody can help support it, that would be great. And stay tuned. Next, I'm going to do a candidate series, part of our candidate series. We're going to have Deb Baber on, who is running for the state assembly and is a fireball for President Trump. Raise a glass to our new sponsor, Republican Red Wine. It's the perfect choice for patriotism, and it's really good to drink. With bottles like Drain the Swamp, 45-47, you'll be the biggest hit at your next Republican party. You know what? It also makes a great conversation piece at the dinner table. To receive 15% off, use promo code CALI, CALI, when you go to Republican Red Wine to purchase your new wine bottles.
Welcome to the MAGA Mall. We have the largest selection of the finest quality MAGA caps and Trump caps that are made. We have over 250 hats and 1,000 different products in 28 product categories. All the caps are made from premium cotton twill. Everything on them is embroidered. As a matter of fact, in the last election cycle, we donated over 45,000 caps to Trump-endorsed candidates and conservative causes all the way across America. And you can buy any of our products by going to our website. It's at themagamall.com, like on the sign over here, and use promo code CALI, and that's for Uncover California. That will get you a 10% discount off of all of our products and also help this worthy cause. And remember, it's always a MAGA day at the MAGA Mall.
Welcome back to Uncover California. Right now, I'm super excited because I have somebody I consider a dear friend that is joining us today. She's a fireball. She's a firecracker. She will not be silent for anybody. But you know what I love about her most? She knows the Constitution. She knows the Bill of Rights. And she does want to look out for people in her district. And that's why she's running for State Assembly District 38. Deb Baber, welcome to Uncover California.
Thank you, Lori. I certainly consider you a dear friend, too, now for several years.
Yes.
And let me first start with my district. My district is in the western part of Ventura County, includes Ojai, Oakview, Ventura, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, more than half of Camarillo, 29,000 of the population there, of the voters. It goes up to Fillmore, Piru, and Santa Paula. And that's the district.
And you're already so busy with everything else. You've been working with Trump Force 47 to get President Trump elected. You're an activist as well. Like, you are not silent. You go to Board of Supervisors meetings. You stand up for the rights of the people. And you're also a member of the Ventura County Republican Party. And you were kind of the one person, well, probably five people against a bunch of people that really didn't care for you too much because you wanted to see change. And there's certain people that don't want to see change. And gladly, 98% of that party has now been flipped. We get seated, including myself, in December, January. But you've really you've never let anybody silence you. So with your assembly race, you're in a blue district. Mm-hmm. How are you able to reach a lot of these people that really don't know what's going on? They're just used to voting blue. And what message would you have for them?
That the message is we need to learn how to govern alongside each other, not despite each other.
Right.
That for too long we've been pitted red against blue, black against white, green against yellow, call it what you like, Republican against Democrat. That's the problem. And because we have had too much in our leadership, both in Democrats and Republicans, that have not been doing it from a principled place and with an understanding of the foundational principles of this nation. As a result, they have been governing for narratives and ideas and not for the reality on the ground. Because the reality is that government should be the smallest thing in our lives. And the biggest thing in our lives should first be our families, and then it should be our immediate community radiating out from there. And our church, of course, our church, or I'm Jewish,
God in
our
country.
faith. One of the things I love to tell people is that this country was established in the American system of government, a republic, not a democracy, for the purpose of a moral people. And in the first 150 years or so of our country's founding, everybody had in common one thing: they all went to Sunday school.
Right.
And because they went to Sunday school every week, they learned to read, they learned to write, they learned to think, critical thinking. Because in Sunday school, it's what you do. You ask the question, why God? Why is the sky blue, God? Why does the tides go in and out, God? Why God? And so you start to reflect on that over time with your friends and your family so that you grow up together in a moral society. And that's what our country was established for. Without that morality, we have problems, and we have that now.
Now, it's interesting that you say that, this left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. I personally really tried to run on my opponent's policies. And she ran on, I was a MAGA extremist with Nazi ideology. They're going to come at you, girl. And they're going to come at you. And what is going to be your response when they start labeling you?
Well, if they label me as a Make America Great Again gal, I'll say thank you very much, because it is about making America great again. It is about putting America first in the same way that I advocate for people to put your family first. Your family comes before the next family, but then the two families that have put each other first, families first, and then themselves together as next, then you radiate out from there. And so I say thank you. Thank you for that. And for those people that want to use it as some kind of smear, I recognize that there's no talking with those individuals. So I'll talk to the other people that may be listening or may be watching, and I'll handle it with grace, I'll handle it with humor, and I'll handle it with simple common sense responses, because that's really all it takes.
Right. And your district is quite large. Mm-hmm. It really is. Do you have a good volunteer base so far, or is there somewhere that people can join the Deb force?
Well, first, let me get it out of the way. You want to go to voteDebBaber.com. That's voteDebBaber.com. That's DEBBABER. And yes, I have a great volunteer base. Several of them are people that have never done political work before in their lives. Part of
Why
that
do
is...
Why do you think you see this desperation for change in people to get involved?
Well, I wouldn't say desperation necessarily. What I'm seeing is that there are people out there that are starting to recognize that they're not comfortable with what they see going on. They're not exactly sure what the problem is. They have some dis-ease with the political landscape. They want to better understand it, and they're ready to get involved. And because they like me, because I'm a great person to like. I love people. I always have. And I listen really well. I have positions, of course, that I do a lot of research on and I think deeply about. I often write about them in private to help organize my thoughts. But I can be persuaded to a different point of view if the arguments are presented and presented well with facts. Then I can be persuaded. But in the absence of that, then I've done a lot of research, a hallmark that I take a great deal of pride in, that I'm not going to just simply take somebody else's word for something. So people have faith in me, and I have faith in them. And I think that's what establishes a great relationship for volunteers.
And one of the things I love about you, again, is the founding documents. You know what this country was built on. Tell everybody what that means to you.
Oh my gosh. It means that if we don't have a firm understanding of the origins of our nation, then we can't begin to know how to govern as self-governors in this world. One of the things that crippled our country a great deal is that phrase, polite company doesn't talk about religion in politics. And the reason that is so damaging to the fabric of our nation is because at the heart of every human society exist politics and religion. and we are a self-governing nation. And if you can't talk about those two major subjects and you can't put them in the proper context of our founding documents, then you cannot self-govern for the prosperity of the greatest number of men and women in the United States, and what made the United States the beacon for the world to come to for liberty, freedom, and prosperity, and the promise of potential freedom and happiness in their lives.
Yeah, you know, I think about you going up to Sacramento, and I really want to see it. I had Bill Asaley on last week, and he was talking about, he stood up against these Assembly Bill 1955 because parents are now not going to be informed if their child is going through a sex change, which is just disgusting. They have stripped him of his committees. They are targeting him big time. He is a freshman assemblyman, and you're walking into a den of vipers that are not going to want to hear what you have to say, that are going to turn off your mic, although I think you could probably project without the mic. What was it that made you want to do this?
That's an excellent question. And it's because I truly believe that we're at the precipice of losing our republic.
And explain real quick, because we keep hearing our democracy's at stake, our democracy. Explain the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy, but go on with your thought first. Sorry.
No, I think that's probably a good place for me to segue to.
Okay.
A pure democracy is tyranny of the majority,
Right.
Because it silences all minority voices. And what we have is we have this emphasis on democracy in this nation by all kinds of talking heads and others that then parrot it, including Republicans and Democrats.
I know. I'm sick of people using it.
Exactly. And so what they are not being sensitive to is that as a constitutional republic, we democratically elect individuals to represent us in the halls of legislatures. An illustration of democratic centralism, for instance, is a term that is used to describe communism and its organizations, where you are not elected locally to represent your local populations, but you get appointments into a body, and then it's the body itself that then democratically performs. So in our country, we democratically elect locals.
Except for Kamala.
Exactly. Well, and actually, now let me go back for a moment to the Sacramento, what we were talking about, the Den of Vipers. Part of the problem that we have in our nation is that we have been conditioned to believe that political parties are actually the governing authorities. As a result, we take those narratives, and too many people run with those as being fact, as being the laws, as being the reality. And as they build laws based on narratives that are not rooted in reality, and that's a problem, and they're not rooted in the constitutional lane of traffic for a legislature or for the executive body or for the judicial body. As a result, people start to get outside their lanes. They start to impinge on others. They start to impact them in great ways. And an obvious example is the executive orders that are used. Executive orders at the federal level that were used to destroy the border that Donald Trump had really put together, the border security there. Executive orders here in California, where Gavin Newsom took it upon himself to protect the public health with an executive order, not legislation, and it's outside his lane to establish through fiat executive order that an emergency is beyond 30 days.
Right.
And so by the time people were involved, they started to realize that it was beyond the 30 days, but too many people had been conditioned to accept it as law, as a statute, as some kind of thing that they had to do. And that's part of the problem.
And in the meantime, he's at the French Laundry and, you know, going to baseball games without a mask on. It was like rules for thee and not for me.
Yes, of course. And that's, again, why I encourage people, you know as much as the next person. There's a question that's often asked, well, are you qualified to run? And my answer is, excuse me, I'm as qualified as the next person just as you are. There are people that hold office today that are legislators, that have had past experience, that are attorneys, that are financial gurus or what have you. And that is not the qualification. You don't have to be a teacher to be qualified to run for the school board. All you have to have is some common sense and an understanding about what education is supposed to do, public education in our country. It's not supposed to teach you about sexual choices. That is not what public education is about at all.
Right.
And so that should not be part of it.
Right. Well, and the thing I like about you, again, is the fact that you know what our rights are. The people of your district, what do you want to give to them? And what do you see not happening for them at this current time with your opponent?
I have a dream. I have a dream.
Okay.
And the dream is that when elected to go to Sacramento, that most of the time I will spend in Ventura County. And what do I mean by that? What I want to do is I want to use every bit of my salary to establish satellite offices in the district itself, where I will sit and attend meetings in Sacramento from those satellite offices, because I want the people in Sacramento to see my bosses sitting behind me. The bosses are the people that elect me. And I want those people that support me by choosing me on the ballot, and those who don't support me, I want them to be able to sit behind me and have Sacramento looking at that group of people, so that I'm answering to the people that are sitting behind me and not to the people in Sacramento.
What committees would you want to be on? And I think you'd have to be in Sacramento to do a lot of the committees, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know. I've not been to Sacramento. I've been looking at some of the pieces of that. I mean, I've not been to Sacramento as a legislator.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Whatever the rules are, they don't have to remain as they are. Just because somebody says that the grass is blue doesn't mean that you have to accept that it's blue. You might go and scratch around and discover that it's blue because somebody spilled paint on it. And that's the reason it's blue. And in fact, you want to go back to what the reality is, what the facts are. What are the actual things that you can do and that you can't do? And so I think that what becomes a problem in Sacramento is that we have been conditioned to believe that there are all kinds of rules and regulations, and that we defer to party affiliations and party bosses to make the decisions. And I understand that this means that there will be those that won't support me on all kinds of sides, and that there will be attempts to silence me. But I think there's a place in government for all people, and I think that we need those kinds of people like myself who will not take no for an answer. Just won't take it.
So your opponent, where do you see him failing his constituents right now?
Well, he governs for a narrative, not for reality. He governs for an ideology. So, for instance, when he was on the Board of Supervisors from 2000, 2001, up to 2020, when he first was elected to go to the Assembly, that's 20 years. That's almost a generation. While there, he was touted for his work on homelessness and his commitment to solve the homeless problem. And yet the last 5 or 6 years that he was there on the Board of Supervisors, homelessness skyrocketed in Ventura County.
Right.
So how much of a solution is he really bringing to the fore? And importantly, now that he's gone from that, how many people are going to remember that he was the one who put into place certain things that people are paying a penalty for today? So what I will do for my constituents, one, I'm going to be available to them. Two, I won't dismiss them just because they didn't vote for me, something that he has done regularly with people that have shared that with me in their frustration and upset at what is going on. And third, I'm not going to be governing for some kind of ideology that doesn't take into account the reality on the ground. Right? So let me just deal with one reality here. You know it's an election year when you see road work going on. It's an election year.
Isn't it bizarre, all the stuff that happens?
100%.
The gas prices will start coming down, and
you see all of this road
everything.
Book, and they're congratulating themselves, and they're thanking the public, and they're asking the public to thank them for doing the job. Well, excuse me, that's a job that should not have to happen, that slows traffic to a standstill so often, that creates, when it's not an election year, you hit those potholes and you do great damage to your car, etc. That sort of thing would not be necessary if proper maintenance was ongoing all the time. And it is not. And that's why it is like a self-creating need. So we have too many people in government that are invested in government. As a result of being invested in government, rather like the Cancer Society, if the Cancer Society ever solves the problem of cancer, they put themselves out of business. If government ever solves the problem that it was created for in our country, we would almost have no government at all.
Which I would love to see.
Exactly.
You know, it's funny too, because you think about all the things that they've done as far as as we were saying, before the 2022 election, they stole from the strategic oil reserves to lower gas prices. Proposition 1 in 2014, they got billions of dollars for water storage, and yet they have not built any. And now they want to raise our water prices. I do remember I spoke to, oh goodness, what was his name? Was it him? Anyways, United Water. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. And he was telling me how they found the steelhead trout out in Piru, even though it wasn't indigenous to the lake. And all these unelected bureaucrats said, can't clean out the Freeman diversion anymore to give water to the ponds for the farmers. What would you do as a state assembly member to try to get rid of some of these unelected bureaucrats? They're basically doing more damage than a lot of the elected people.
I loved what Donald Trump had said when he was in the presidency, where he said, for every regulation that you want to introduce, you have to get rid of 2. So we are overregulated and we are greatly governed, and all of that needs to be reduced. So some of the way I would reduce that, there are 3 things that I would like to, 3 bills I'd like to promote almost immediately.
Okay.
One I call the poison pill bill. The poison pill bill would affect something like, and the biggest example right now would be the bullet train. That basically what this would do, the bill would allow the taxpayers, the voters, right, that a particular project like the bullet train would have a schedule that it was supposed to meet, and it would have a budget that it's supposed to meet. And if within a certain parameter it goes outside of either or both of those features, that automatically, without exception, it goes on the next election cycle for the people in California to vote a thumbs up or thumbs down to that project. It would start to put some real teeth to it so that we, the taxpayers, who are having to fund all of it, would not have to tolerate a bullet train to nowhere for billions and billions and billions of dollars for over a decade, for nearly 2 decades long. We wouldn't have to do it. We'd be able to kill it soon. That's one. That's a poison pill bill. Another one is the floodlight statutes. The floodlight statutes, now we already have visibility on the per diem spend on the council people, on the assembly members, and on up there, and senators. But what I want is I want them to have to publish that on their websites so that the individual who's trying to look for that information only needs to know who their representative is. They don't need to then go to one place to then drill down on their representative. They just go to where they always go to look for things about their local issues. And right there they find it, and they see how that money is being spent right away. That's one. Then the last one.
Because there is no transparency right now. Like, it is super hard to even find what your representatives are voting on. And then they put up a bill for the public to vote on, and they killed the I think it was the SAFE Act, which would have told us what we were voting on, so they could say, bill for fluffy puppies, and it's to let people out of jail.
Right. So
yes is no, no is yes.
And that goes to the third bill I would want. And I call this bill Words Matter, Sticks and Stones. And what this bill would do is it would require every single measure that goes on the ballot, regardless of whether it is state or local, every single measure would have to be written at a 6th grade reading level. And importantly, that there are public tools available, such as the Fleisch-Kincaid reading comprehension test, developed, I think, by the Navy many years ago, so that new recruits could learn how to work machinery and read the manuals. They developed this reading and comprehension test called Fleisch-Kincaid, which has been used for decades. Back in the 50s, I think, is when it first started. So anybody could take a measure that is being proposed, plug it into the calculator for Fleisch-Kincaid, and say, excuse me, legislature or whomever, that registers above a 6th grade level according to Fleisch-Kincaid. You have to rework it. It is not acceptable. By law, you can't put that on there. And that would force people to have to actually say what something is and not use words to deceive or mask the real purpose of that particular bill. For instance, the California Healthy Youth Act. It sounds fantastic, sounds grandiose. But what that bill did under that cover, it allowed a whole host of things to go into the public school systems that the public schools, one, should not be involved in, and two, that speak to this whole sexualization of our youth. A really horrible thing.
Really horrible thing.
Yeah.
Now, I want to pivot a little bit. Tell me why you love Donald Trump.
Oh, Donald Trump. That's an easy one. It's really easy. I lived in New York City for 34 years. I've been following politics since I was 15. I'm 68. I began following Donald Trump in 1979. I followed him the whole time that I was there, and since. He is the real deal. One of the ways that you can look at that, a couple of common sense ways you can analyze it for yourself. One, he has 5 children. Those 5 children have never been in scandalous situations, ever, whereas many others have. That's one.
Hunter.
For one. Right. Then we have 2. Donald Trump has been married 3 times. His first 2 wives, except during the throes of divorce, which people can get very, of course, understandably intense about, outside of that, neither of his wives had anything bad to say about him. Quite the contrary. In fact, they partnered in raising their children and partnered in the family events and partnered in the joy of having a family together. Not that they were no longer husband and wife, but the fact that they had produced great offspring and were proud of them, and that they wanted joy in their lives and the lives of their grandchildren. So those kinds of features are the things that tell you who the man really is. I also have a very good friend back in New York who came here when she was 15 from the Ukraine with her mother. And Mila, many years ago, auditioned for The Apprentice. So while I had never met Donald Trump in person, my friend Mila did involve with him for a while. And Mila said that, 1, he's much more handsome in person than you can imagine.
Yeah.
As you would know, having met him.
He's got a great smile.
And she said, 2, he's really tall. And 3, he's one of the nicest people and one of the funniest men I have ever met in my life. And all of those things go with all the research I've done on Donald Trump. I have, I listened to programs. I've never once in my entire life of 68 years gotten news from television, ever. In fact, I didn't own a television for over 30 years. And only when 9/11 happened, which I watched one of the World Trade Centers fall.
Were you in New York at that time?
I was watching it from my conference room. Thank you.
Wow.
I was watching it from my conference room. I could see from my terrace on the Upper East Side, I could see the smoke for about 10 days following it. And it was horrific. And only then did I pull my television out of the closet and hook up some tin foil to it so I could get some kind of broadcast. But aside from that, I have never, ever in my entire life gotten news from television. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am not susceptible, the way so many are, to the sound bites that are out there.
Well, their latest buzzword is weird. You know, it's like they poll test these words so they can indoctrinate people. Mm-hmm. You know, it used to be constitutional crisis, manufactured crisis. I mean, there's so many buzzwords. And I woke up in 2011 to the nonsense. Mm-hmm. Now, your old state of New York, oh my gosh, they're going after Donald Trump. And it's pathetic. Well, it's just disgusting.
E. Jean Carroll, I knew her.
You knew her?
I knew her.
You knew the
I knew her years ago, and the reason why I knew her is because I was working at Simon & Schuster Audio. I was a managing editor there. We had the state-of-the-art studio for recording audiobooks. And she came in. We were publishing her book as a book through, the other section of Simon & Schuster, and then we were publishing her audiobook. And she would come into the studio. And she was a nut then, and she's a nut today. And she was the talk of the staff in how crazy she was, and her flippant way of dealing with people and bragging about her sexual conquest and bragging about her sexual activity, proclivity, understanding, etc., was, in my mind, it was unacceptable, and it was grotesque, and it was all for the money.
And see, for me, I always challenge people. Let's go into Neiman Marcus. You can come with me. We'll go into a dressing room and I'll scream. Let's see what happens. Deb, I hate to say this, but our time is running out. I can't even believe it went super fast. Tell everybody where they can find you and how they can donate to your campaign.
Well, thank you. The best way to donate to my campaign is to go to votedebbaber.com. That's votedebbaber.com. That's the best way to donate to the campaign. To support the campaign, you can also sign up there. And I would just like to say this, that I truly believe Trump's Agenda 47, and it's his Agenda 47, not Project 2025.
That's
Agenda
another narrative.
Exactly. Agenda 47, the principles found in that, turned into policies in District 38 in Ventura County, will turn dreams into destiny. Because it's the principles that are the foundation that will underscore the policies that I create for District 38. And that makes it possible for the most people to have the greatest opportunity for prosperity and happiness.
I'm really happy you're running. Thank you for doing it. I know it takes a lot. So and you're involved in so many other things too. And I really appreciate you. Social media accounts, is there anywhere people can follow you there?
Thank you, Lori. I haven't been doing a lot of social media for the campaign.
Okay.
Now I'm out there on social media. People, I make no secret about who I am, who I support, and how to get to me. Because there's nothing secret about my life. The greatest strength I have is that I tell the truth. I tell the truth in all situations. So I don't have social media for my campaign. I haven't ruled it out. But to tell you the truth, I had an experience a couple of years ago where I was dissed and I had almost 1 million views. This is when I would not comply with COVID.
I got completely banned.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I would not comply during COVID. I appeared before the Board of Supervisors. Somebody took it viral. There were over 1 million hits. It ultimately resulted in my appearing on the Dr. Phil show, which was kind of interesting.
Oh, how funny.
But what happened is that I ended up getting the most vile phone calls and emails, and not emails to my account, but through Facebook, and messages, which I didn't respond to, vile, sexual, violent ones. And I finally, about 1,000 of them had accumulated. I finally thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a look at 100 of these or so, and I'm going to see who these people are without responding to their messages on Facebook. What did I discover? Of the 100 or so emails or the Facebook messages I got, 80% of them were not from Ventura. And not only were the 80% not from Ventura, but most of that 80% were not from the United States.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yes. So live your lived experience, let your common sense inform you, and trust what you see with your eyes, what you know with your heart.
Wow. Well, I love you, and
Love you
we
too.
will talk soon.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, that was our episode this week. Tune in next week. We're going to do another candidate series. We are going to have State Senator Mike Morellin, and then we will also have Assembly candidate Patrick Gibson. Hope you have a great week. Hey guys, if you missed the movie Letter to the American Church on August 1st, it's not too late. On August 22nd, we're going to premiere at the Roxy Theater in Camarillo at 7 o'clock, The War on Truth. There will be a question-answer session with the producers, and also could be a few J6ers in the room to share their stories with you. It's a film opportunity you're not going to get anywhere else. It's the only time you're going to be able to see it on the big screen. Go to uncovercali.com for tickets.